it is the right time and the right place. I'd like to welcome you all to our Canyon City Energy Franchise Committee meeting. We do have a couple of actually 3 people we're going to be hearing from here this morning. So that should be pretty good. I will do a roll call. So I am here, Carol Dunn is here, Doug Cohen is here, Kirk Souther's here, Emily Tracy's here, Kathy Worthington is here. We also have Ryan Stevens and Leo Evans, who is our Public Works Director. Steve, good morning. Steve Andrews, who's a citizen. And we do have a couple of guests, and we'll be introducing those as we go. But what I thought we would do maybe is Steve, you got a request to speak? As the lone citizen representative. That'll give me in. He'll speak as he. Okay, I don't think that we have any old business pending right now. New business, we're gonna probably do Leo's presentation first, and then hear from Tom, and then Gail. And so Leo, you wanna? So let me set this up a little bit. City Council has a decision to make, and City Council would like input from the Energy Committee on what direction, if any, the committee would recommend, or committee's thoughts on the possibility of solar powered streetlights on the East Highway 50 lighting control plan. And so keep that in mind as we go through this, but and so Leo, take her away.
Thank you, John. Yeah, really, this topic's been brought to City Council a couple times and sent back for different revisions and different changes. And I think we're getting close to bringing it back again. And one of the things that came up last time it was at council was to see if Energy Committee wanted to weigh in or had a preference on this. City has $725,000 budgeted to install streetlights on the eastern portion of US 50. The project limits kind of run from 15th Street up towards McKenzie. Yeah, and so we have 3 options. Option 1 is direct wired grid powered lights, traditional street lights. That's been the option that we've spent the most time looking at today. We do currently have a standing contract offer from Black Hills Energy to do that work. I think I mentioned the $725K. The full project to do that 15th Street to McKenzie is about $2.1 million in what Black Hills has estimated. So we've got the funds to do roughly a third of the project. And Black Hills, like I said, they've sent us 2 different offers. They sent us an offer to do 100% of the project scope in a third of the project length. And then they've sent us an offer that essentially scatters the lights at the most critical intersections and driveways and places like that throughout the entire corridor. So those are kind of the 2 things we have right now.
Leo, could I ask you?
Yeah.
For that we jump in with questions or?
Oh, absolutely. Interrupt me whenever you'd like. The other 2 options were a couple of solar variety options. One that Black Hills Energy would own and maintain, and one that the city would own and maintain.
You're talking about the dollar figures. Is this something that there's grant money available for part of it, or is it just the city funds?
Most of the project is funded by grants right now through CDOT. I think it's on there. 602,000 is there's 2 separate grants that we have through CDOT for that, and the rest of it's local match. We've explored a couple of other grant programs trying to get to that $2.1 million number, and we just haven't been able to find a program that'll be a good fit and a good application for this yet.
Leo, excuse me.
Yeah, Doug.
So you're talking from when you come in down the hill?
Yeah, from Home Depot up to 15th Street. It's
Okay.
about 2 miles, I want to say, little touch over 2 miles.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep. So the direct wired option that we've looked at many times or a couple of times before, I tried to summarize just some pros and cons of each of these as we talk about them. You know, in a direct wired setup, the city's not responsible to maintain those. We pay a monthly tariff per light to Black Hills Energy that covers the operation and maintenance of those lights. I believe unless it changed in 2024, I think it's $8.22 a month per light based on the size of light and the type. You know, these are federal grant dollars that are being passed through CDOT to us. So usually they come with a lot of federal strings attached. You have to go through NEPA clearances for, you know, checking endangered species and checking all sorts of environmental impacts. You have to do SHPO for historical clearances. In this instance, if we were to contract with Black Hills to install that, we do not have to do any of those. CDOT has granted us an exemption from the normal process in treating these like any other utility project in the right of way. So it does allow us a simplified, lower staff resource allocation to kind of get this work done. The other thing, it'll come up later, crash testing is done. These being in the CDOT right of way, these poles are only about 8 to 10 feet off the edge of the road. They do need to be crash tested to be certified for installation in that location. And with that, if we were to go ahead with this system, I think the estimation is around 6 months, we could be done with construction. There are some longer lead time items out there for these, but 6 months is far and away the quickest installation we can get of the three options. You know, if you look at maybe the cons of a system like this, the city doesn't have a lot of input into what the look and feel of the lights are. You know, Black Hills has standard products that they put out, that they maintain, you know, that's what you get. And they're not solar powered. So if looking for green options that are more energy neutral is a key factor for us, you know, these are not solar powered lights, they're grid tied lights. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. The second option, which is really kind of a cool option if it works out, is solar powered lights that are owned by the utility company. So these would be green, obviously solar lights. City would not assume any long-term maintenance responsibility for these. It would still allow for the simplified CDOT process where we could get a quick installation. The downside of this is there is currently no regulatory framework for this. You know, Black Hills would have to petition the Public Utilities Commission to create a tariff for this. That I'm sure takes a long time. I've never done it. And Black Hills would have to, you know, do an RFP process to pick which materials they're going to take, which again would take a lot of time. Probably the longest time frame of any of the options on this route. You know, I think we had tossed around 18 months as like a best case scenario to get through the Public Utilities Commission, the RFP process, and all those things. These would also require crash testing again. You know, and one of the things we found is that none of the solar options have gone through real extensive crash testing to meet CDOT standards. CDOT has one light that they've used for a couple of remote chain up stations where they've used solar lights on their system. They did not advise us to use that model. They've not been happy with the performance and the outcome of it. So crash testing will be another thing that'll be big for solar. I think I missed it on the first slide, but I touched on it earlier. The direct wired can put in about 23 lights for the money we have budgeted right now. And 23 lights is about a third of the project. This one, we don't know. We won't know until Black Hills does their RFP, picks their product, does a design. We won't know how many lights we can get. Go ahead. And last option is city owned and maintained solar powered lights. So again, pretty self-explanatory, solar powered. We would have a lot more control into what these look like and what the design is. Downside is we would be responsible for the long-term maintenance. You know, this would be a city responsibility to take care of these every time they require routine maintenance, every time they get hit by a car, every time one of our own mowers runs into them, whatever it is, it would be the city's job to take care of that financially and in every other way. It does not allow for the simplified CDOT process either. We would have to full design, engineer, environmental clearance for all stages of this, which would take a lot of staff resources and time to do. So certainly can be done. If, like I said, if solar is really one of the driving factors for us, then this is our way that we can probably best guarantee that. Down at the bottom, roughly, we think we could do about 40 to 45 solar powered lights in this route. The price data that we found so far is that solar lights are about half as much per location as a Black Hill light. But to offset that, it takes twice as many solar lights to do the same thing as one Black Hills light does. So, we're gonna get 40 to 45 lights, but we're gonna illuminate roughly the same area that Black Hills could illuminate with 23 direct powered lights. So you don't gain a lot there. Thanks, Ryan. And to that point, the big picture capital cost, option 1 and option 3 are really the only two that we have good numbers for right now. And either of them will illuminate roughly the same amount of US 50. So we can accomplish roughly the same amount of illumination on the street in either of those scenarios. One with 23 Black Hills lights and the other with 40 to 45 city-owned maintained solar lights. Yep. Looking at it long-term, there is a bit more difference here. I mentioned the monthly tariff that we pay Black Hills to maintain our direct powered lights, $8.22. If you run that out over a 10-year period for the 23 initial lights, we as a city be looking at just shy of $23,000. Go down to option 3, a city-owned, maintained solar light. There is no monthly cost. There's nothing to maintain them. There are parts warranties for 5 years on most that we found. Most of them require a battery replacement in 10 to 12-year window, which costs about $700. And they also recommend that the luminaire be evaluated at that time, which can push it up to $825 a light. Over that same 10-year period, just the batteries and lights would cost us about $33,000 to maintain. And that does not factor in any vehicle crashes, any accidents, any other damages that happen, nor does it factor in the end of life of the product that 50 years from now, when they all need to be replaced just to be upgraded, that would be another city-borne cost. So direct wired does offer, at least on my assessment, a lot better value for your long-term maintenance costs on this site in this type of application. Next. Now, the other consideration I mentioned, it takes 2 solar lights to do the same thing one direct wired light can do. Our US 50 pedestrian crossing project that's underway requires 12 streetlights to be installed at those new mid-block pedestrian crossings. In those instances, we can do that at a 1-to-1 ratio. One solar light can light the same single point as well as one direct wired light. So we had a quote from Black Hills that was around $310,000 to do those 12 streetlights. We received a quote through our contractor utilizing Fonroche Solar to light those same locations for about $167,000.
Explain why it's 1-to-1 here, but
It's-
not elsewhere.
Because you're lighting just a single point rather than lighting a whole corridor, that the east part, you're lighting that entire corridor to a certain standard. One of the bigger things, the direct powered lights have a lot more output, a lot more luminaires or candle foot candles, whatever you want to call it, that come out of it. They're mounted on higher poles. They're mounted on 40-foot poles, so they can broadcast that light further. The solar lights are quite a bit heavier because of the batteries and the solar engines. Their light poles are only about 20 to 25 feet high, so they just don't cast light as well to wide areas as the direct fired ones do. So here we felt like this solution makes a lot of sense. Another thing we have going for us on this site is that crash testing is less important on low speed roadways that have curb and gutter. As long as we place the light poles 4 foot behind the curb, they don't need to have any sort of CDOT FHWA crash testing certification. So you think about that here, there's buildings that are 5 foot behind the back of curb in those places. So it's treated more like a fixed object than it is something that is intended to get hit by vehicles.
So we can consider this a separate item.
Yes. Yep. So in this instance, staff felt really strongly that this was certainly the way to go. There is some long-term maintenance result of that, but just being at a 1-to-1 ratio and coming in at half the cost, this does make a lot of sense to use solar in this installation. So I wanted to point that out just to say, even if we decide that it's not the right solution for East Highway 50, we do think it is the right solution here. And we do intend to bring a change order to the project to incorporate those into that project.
So in this area, are there any, or does the city expect any issues with having a low finding the locations they need to install the lights.
We do not. They'll be directly adjacent to all of the mid-block crossings. And we have those crossings that have the yellow signs that flash the lights at you. Those are also solar powered. So it made a lot of sense that they've already been looked at to have solar installations at that site. This is a good site for compatible solar installations. Yep, that's it. And then really, just kind of following council's direction to bring this here, see if the energy committee had any strong feelings one way or another. Obviously, if having solar power is the preference, then option 3 is really the way to go. It puts the control in the city. It's going to take more time to get, and it's going to take some more resources in terms of city staff time to push a project forward like that. That is the best way that we can probably guarantee solar right now today. Option 2 has a lot of merit. It's just going to take a lot of time to flesh out for Black Hills to establish a tariff and pick a product and have that be available to us. Not to say if time isn't an issue, option 2 is a good route for us as well, but it probably kicks this out to a 2025 or 2026 project for the city. Option 1 is, we can get that done quickly and move that forward in a relatively quick time frame. And I think the end outcomes will be very similar to the amount of lights that we can provide in the other scenarios. And it does have a little bit of advantage in terms of long-term maintenance responsibility and cost.
Leo, I've got a couple of questions. On backing up and looking at the overall project, right now, we're planning, we've got budgeted to do a third of it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right.
And so really the whole project is the spending for the whole project, or the year in which we spend for the whole project is yet to be determined by the administrator and council. Is that right?
It's budgeted.
It completely to finish in 3 years?
Oh, not
No,
completely.
just the first
Yeah.
phase.
Just the first
Just
We-
the,
Just,
Yeah, I
yeah,
understand
sorry,
that.
phase 1, we would have to find additional funding to complete the project.
Okay.
Which end are you gonna, would you wanna start at?
We took the approach of looking at the most critical intersections rather than starting on one end or the other.
Perfect, okay.
yeah, it would scatter 23 lights at intersections and driveways and things like that to try to spread it out rather than going full in on a third of the length.
So the question mark we've got is what grant funding may be available in the years past year 1? Is that right? Because that's gonna drive whether we're gonna do it, right?
I mean, we're planning on moving forward regardless of whether or not we have funding for the future years. As funding comes available, we would apply for it and move the project forward. But we need to make sure that we know where council and the energy committee want us to start. If we're gonna go solar, the
Yeah.
future years, it's all gonna be solar. If we're gonna go direct wired, future years, it's all gonna be direct wired. We just need to make sure that we're starting the project in the right place.
So I've got a question and maybe even Gail can help us out on this one. But, so what, speaking of the tariff that Black Hills and the PUC would have to establish, the tariff would be a fee that we would be charged, is that correct?
Yes, that would be a monthly fee per light that we
Per
would
light.
be charged, and that covers the operation and maintenance expenses of that facility.
And if you-
Solar,
Yes,
not city, so,
not city solar. City solar, there would be no set monthly fee. We would just have to budget yearly to, whatever our expected capital costs are.
Right.
How many times is it gonna get hit, those kind of things.
Yeah, we would probably do something similar where we take a dollar amount per month and, set it aside and
So you
put it
put
into a
that-
restricted fund.
5 per month. It
Something, yeah.
could be higher, lower, or
We do some right now. The lights on Main Street are owned by the city and maintained by the city, so we have to periodically address those as bulbs burn out or if they happen to get hit by cars. They don't get damaged too frequently. I think maybe one at one of the roundabouts has been hit since I've been here. but
We've
that's
had,
about the
we've
extent
had
of
a
it.
few due to DUI.
Yeah,
oh geez.
sometimes we can get insurance to cover some of that too, which
In town, the impact on those lights would not be near as great as that on the highway.
oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. as usual, I'm way behind, but what is the main purpose or why is this project being pursued?
Safety.
Safety.
I think, you know, if back to last week, we were talking about the US 50 East Access Plan, and I think in the 5 years of crashes that we analyzed, looking at our multimodal plan and some other work, there's 5 fatal crashes in the city limits. 4 of them occurred on US 50 in this, and 3 of those were in this project area. 2 of those 3 were pedestrians that were struck at night in unlighted conditions. So it backs into trying to prevent crashes and accidents.
Thank you.
Okay, on the, what is the life, so there's 2 components to the solar. There's a solar panel and the battery backup.
Mhm.
Okay, do we know the expected life of the panels in batteries?
That's the 10 to 12
The
year.
batteries are the 10 to 12. The batteries and the controller panel are 10 to 12 years.
I've heard 20.
I think the solar engines are longer, like 25 or 30. I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we had solar panels being maintained by the city and a 20 to 25 year lifetime, would we expect to have to get up there to clean the panels?
It potentially. Most of the Fon Roche system offers a monitoring software that you can get where it'll report if this isn't working or if your solar engine is underperforming, you can get notifications of that. So we would have to address those as they come up.
Do we have a way that we could clean the panels?
We have the High Ranger in Forestry Department, the bucket truck.
Would that require any CDOT traffic control? type
Yes,
things?
it would require traffic control to access those locations.
Yeah.
Some of them can probably be accessed from parking lots on the backside. But I'm sure some of them would require a lane closure.
Right, exactly, okay. In terms of battery performance, what would we expect if we had a week of cloudy weather?
These panels, the ones that we've spec'd out here have the largest battery they provide. I would have to go look at it again. I believe it runs for 5 days. If it's cloudy, it'll run for 5 days. So they're supposedly as reliable as a direct wired light. You know, grid powered has outages and things like that just as well, you know, burnouts. It's supposedly 99% reliability.
Is there any, now tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking like in my yard, I have motion activated solar lights in front and back of my house, and I don't even think about, is it a cloudy day or not? They just work. I never had them not work due to weather, so I don't know if that's the same.
Yeah, they would probably still charge, but you know, the efficiency of which rate they charge during cloudy weather is going to be different.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
What about temperature dependence?
The solar ones have a wide enough range to cover us. I want to say it's -30 to +70
Yeah.
Celsius. Yeah.
What kind of battery is it?
I think it's a nickel metal hydride in these ones.
Nickel metal hydride, so it's not like a,
Lithium.
some of the batteries are.
Yeah, it's
Lithium-ion,
it's a little older technology, but I think that was one of their points was that the nickel metal had a broader temperature range.
Right.
It is heavier and bigger though. I know it does
Mhm.
weigh a lot more. The system that Fon Roche proposes, actually all their components kind of just plug into each other. You don't need an electrician to swap a solar engine. Unplug the old one, you plug the new one in. You don't need an electrician to switch the luminaire. You know, it's simplified system, which was important to us if we were looking for something we had to maintain.
and the battery itself would be at ground level.
No, the battery is elevated. Everything of value is elevated on the poles. There's,
So, but to me, this is kind of important. How much does the battery weigh?
I would have to get the spec sheet. I want to say it's about 60 pounds.
60 pounds.
60 pounds for the battery and the controller, I believe.
Yeah.
I could send you the cut sheet. I don't know if I happen to bring it with me or not.
Of course, when you're
Okay,
suspending
no
something
problem.
heavy,
That is fine.
heavy up in the air
I
like
got it.
that,
Bye.
a couple of different considerations. Number one, you got different dynamics for stability in windstorms. And you also have the additional concern of if somebody hits the pole and that 60-pound battery comes down, where's it gonna land? Who is it gonna land?
Yeah,
Versus a transformer way.
Transformers aren't up.
no, no,
We're just talking about general. Right.
Yeah, oh, okay, so that thing on the pole that's this big and that big around, what's that?
Transformer,
That's what I was trying to, that,
Right.
the electrical transformer.
Yeah.
Okay,
That there are other things that can fall on the heads.
raindrops, for instance.
But that's why we would still need, the solar provider still needs to do crash testing for, to answer those types of questions.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to go look. I know they've quoted me their wind loading design before and compared it to what our building criteria calls for, and it exceeds that. They're quite a large manufacturer in other parts of the world. I don't know that they have a huge footprint here in the United States yet.
They're more well-known in Europe, and they're a French based company.
I don't know that there's many here locally that are producing a lot yet of streetlights.
Yeah, most of what they produce and do here in the US are parking lots and private roads.
So a couple of related questions. We are going to do the solar lights, as I recall you saying, in this area where we're doing the pedestrian access. Will it give us any information? I don't know how quickly that will happen, but I just wonder if the information from those will help us with this East Highway 50 question. And then the other question I have is, if the city decides to try city-owned solar on East Highway 50, gets part of that done for whatever reason after a year or two or some period of time, is not happy with that, is there still an opportunity to say, well, we need to do the rest of the lights direct wired with Black Hills? And what would be the downside if it involved that? So that's two.
The ones out here will be installed probably in April or May. So I would say we'll have some data by the end of the calendar year, certainly 6 months of operation to see how well they're going and what people like or don't like about them. In terms of the other project, if we decided to build a city-owned solar first, and then I don't think there's a way we get out of taking care of it and maintaining it. We own that for the life of that system once it's in the ground. If we did cancel on that, I'm sure CDOT would send us a bill for their $600,000 back that they paid for those and expect that. We could certainly intermix them though, going forward from there. I don't think there's any real restriction on that. If you start with direct wired, it probably makes it easier to continue that way because they'll have to install lines to feed certain locations that could then be used to feed other locations. It might make those later direct wired installations more expensive than they would be if you had started that way otherwise.
have you guys considered the amount of how many additional personnel and equipment it would take to maintain a city-owned system?
We have not done a detailed evaluation, no. I said, we maintain the ones on Main Street right now, and the 12 additional that we proposed, we kind of felt that would fall into that same area and let us get a taste of these new products to see if they're different than the ones on Main Street. Maybe they take more work than the other ones that don't take a lot.
do we have any towns or cities that have used the solar to where you could get a feedback from them?
I think the city, they had a couple of cities in California. They've done some work in like Los Angeles and San Jose and some of those places. So,
Yeah,
and I think a lot of the other places that I remember them citing have municipal electric. So they have dedicated personnel that kind of do that work already.
sure.
Whereas opposed to us, we would be subbing in with our forestry or our street crew to, tackle that for now.
Is there a time frame with the CDOT money of when you have to spend it or?
We have a deadline to finish the design phase in June of this year. We were told that it is extendable though. So, and I asked if we had a end date for the grants and I was told we did not. But I need to double check that because I believe
That
one of
doesn't
them
sound-
was ARPA funding, which would expire in 2026, I want to say.
It would have to be committed by the end of this year and then it expires in 2026.
Yeah,
So if it's
the
not-
guy, our engineer has about 150 projects he's managing. I think he mixed us up on that one, but.
Yeah.
I think that's very important to know those timeframes.
Yeah,
Does the $8.22 a month for the Black Hills wired option include electricity costs?
Mhm.
yes,
That includes electricity,
Mm.
yeah, they're all unmetered.
okay. Unmetered, and so it's a flat fee, essentially.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, there's no meter to charge any other rate for the electricity used
Gotcha.
by the light.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been a few years, but when I left XL, they were talking about cities taking over their own streetlights. They wanted, and a lot of the cities wanted to, because they were sick and tired of the variety of the lights that we offered, this and that and the other, but I'd be real curious to know if any cities actually did it, because upper management said, no, we gotta hang on to this. Those of us that worked in the field said, let the damn cities have the stupid lights. But how's that for a, yeah, I'm sure you've heard that. So anyway, it's like, I don't know what ever ended up with it as to how it ended, but it was like, boy, I guess I have too much utility mind in me, because I just think that paying the flat fee, especially on a busy highway, just to be able to know that we've got lighting, I guess I still look at the wire, so I'm just gonna throw that out.
To answer your question, Kathy, there, a lot of municipalities have been looking at taking over the streetlights. It's more of a communications play, using the,
Leverage.
5G technology and renting the space on top of the poles and things like that.
Okay.
On your maintenance cost comparison, are those apples to apples comparison, the 22,000 for the Black Hills wired versus the Canyon City solar option of 33,000?
Yeah,
Apples to
that's
apples?
a 10-year,
That's a
10-year period. Yeah,
That includes the purchase cost,
no, that's just the long-term recurring maintenance costs.
just maintenance.
Yep. Operation and maintenance, there's not much operation cost to the solar other than replacing the batteries, replacing the luminaires, fixing whatever breaks outside of warranty periods.
And that's because the kind of the assumption there is because we're assuming the installation costs are gonna be about the same either way.
Yeah, I was presuming that we would spend our $725,000 either way. And like I said, one buys you half as many lights as the other, so that factors into that long-term maintenance as well. In the 10-year maintenance scenario, that's considering maintaining 40 solar lights versus maintaining that tariff on 23 grid powered lights.
The 33 does not include the staff time. Any,
Right.
putting out the equipment and the staff, that is not included in that.
Or any
33,000.
call outs for crashes.
Would there be any way to lay this all out in a spreadsheet format or something like that, so that we have installation costs were known and.
Yeah.
In other words, a little bit of a more of a formal financial analysis to be able to look at all the different factors, because the difference in cost per light, we get more one way versus another way. I mean, there's.
It's a lot. No,
It's
for a guy that's stared at it and looked at it for months, it makes sense, but I get you.
You've done a lot with this, I would say.
Yeah.
But no, we could certainly try to put that into a more simplified life cycle cost type thing where here's a 30-year life cycle cost for this product.
An engineer, I like spreadsheets.
I'm with you.
Sure.
Why don't you introduce yourself too?
Sure, Tom Wenzel. I was planning engineer for Black Hills Energy for 35 years. So I know a lot about, in fact, I wrote a lot of the specs for the what the Black Hills is doing. LEDs, I'm assuming that's what you're gonna have on these solar powered lights?
Yep.
Usually if you're all in one thing, the batteries are susceptible to heat. The LEDs are the solar panels are not, solar panels are gonna stand up to anything. But LEDs, heat kills. So I don't know if they've tested them or how that goes. If you have a LED streetlight
Mhm.
or a turn signal or whatever, a traffic signal, you'll notice that some of the dots are
Mm.
missing. That's because their heat kills them. That's why LED streetlights are great on grid power because it's nighttime and the temperature is way down.
Mhm.
So I don't know if they've looked at that, but historically, lighting has been a money pit for utilities. It's always has been.
I would believe it, looking at $8.22 a month.
You have, but you have with LEDs, you go from a 400 watt high pressure sodium street light to, less than 100 watts on LED lights.
Mhm.
So the energy consumption is significantly less on LEDs. And you get whatever color you want and whatever pattern on this. Well, if this Black Hills doing it, you get like 2 or 3 different choices for what the pattern looks like on the ground.
Mhm.
But heat is the enemy of LED lights.
How did didn't Pueblo do a study and put in some LED streetlights and stuff? Other than the fact that I know that got into a rate issue, but are these lights, if we went with the wired, are they gonna be high pressure sodium, or are they gonna be LED?
No, they were, I think 100, I think is it your tariff schedule listed as 140 watt LED, but I don't know if it's truly 140 or if it's a range outside of that.
It's probably 140 is the wattage and they're gonna be LEDs. And they stop by.
So
the
you're looking at LEDs.
Or they stop by
either
high
way.
pressure sodium.
Right,
Is that what we have now?
No.
High pressure sodium?
Most of like the orangish ones
Yeah.
you see are high pressure sodium, right? If you see a real bright white one, it's usually
Like
LED.
they installed out at the new intersection of Reynolds. Those are LEDs, I think. Those are really bright.
I'd have to look. You can get the LEDs in different temperatures too, but the ones that stand out are the real bright white ones most of the
Yeah,
time.
and how many lights are there in that section of road now?
Of US 50?
Yeah,
I think there are only a handful of lights at the traffic signal locations.
no.
I think
Handful.
I think there's two lights mounted at each traffic signal, and that may be it. There may be one or two extra in
The
there.
ones that are in between face Fremont Drive, and there's still like a guy standing out there with a little
Yeah,
Coleman lantern.
there's a few of those left over that face Fremont Drive.
All the time, and it's like driving off into, well, and I was gonna say Kansas, but every little town in Kansas is lit up like Christmas all the way down the main street. So I've been pushing for streetlights for as long as I've been on this committee and before, because it's dangerous out there. It scares the heck out of me driving out there
Yeah.
at night, especially if it's raining. You can kill somebody really easily, and I don't want that to be me that does the killing.
Okay, any other questions for Leo? We need to reach a consensus or make a recommendation, I think, the council to go along with Leo's future presentation.
You can see it again, couple of it.
I saw it twice. I looked at it when I over breakfast.
But any thoughts on that?
Heard mine.
Well, you're an option one gal.
I'm an option one, yeah.
I don't know, did we ask or did you say, Leo, are the existing street lights on Main, are they wired or are they solar? What's,
They're wired.
so, and then. But they're, I assume they're sized for Main Street as opposed to a highway.
Yeah,
Correct.
they're more pedestrian level lighting
the
than they are
decorative
street
ones.
lighting. They do both purposes.
Yeah.
Then I think there's large overhead street lighting at the intersections along Main Street in addition to the So the lower pedestrian ones.
What, just a note, picturing the decorative ones along Main. What's the height of the solar ones? They would still be taller than that,
Yes,
obviously.
I think they're
but-
25-foot poles for the solar. The ones on Main, I believe, are 14 or 15-foot
Okay.
poles.
But we're still versus, so 25 versus 40 feet.
Yep.
Big difference as far as out.
What are your thoughts? Chris?
Well, it doesn't seem like that. There's a lot of technology or a lot of use right now to really know the success of it. If you're saying there are just a few cities that have done it,
For the solar.
yeah.
Yeah, there isn't a big footprint of solar street lighting in the US that we've been able to find. I think it is something that, I mean, talking with Black Hills, it sounds like it's of interest to them to pursue creating this tariff. It could help them in situations where, you know, you may be a half mile away from the closest direct powered light and you want to put a street light there. You know, it's gonna have its merits, but it's kind of untested and not a lot of data around here.
You know, we were talking about if we went part solar and then decided that we didn't like that and went to wired, what happens if we go with part wired? And then as technology and the tariff and so forth is developed, we maybe say, okay, now, what's the pros and cons of something like that?
So let me ask the question a little bit different way.
Please.
The different way I would ask it, if after 5 years and Black Hills installed these lights, if we chose the wired option. And we said 5 years, okay, Black Hills, we don't like them anymore, take them out. What happens?
I would imagine we pay Black Hills to remove the lights and the tariff gets removed. I mean, like you would have to go back to the whole grant argument of whether CDOT's gonna say, hey, we paid you $600,000 to put these lights up, you can't just take them down. You know, I would imagine Black Hills has a process for removing unwanted streetlights, just like they have a process for adding them.
Well, and plus, I think a factor in that would probably be the capital cost involved. I mean, it's,
Mhm.
you know, because there are expenses for Black Hills to put them up,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of a untested territory, is if we did something like that.
Mhm.
You know, 5 years, if it's all Jim Cracky, you know, technology and everybody's like, boy, this is really the way to go. And people are really liking it and other, that have done it. We told Black Hills, okay, thanks a lot, hold it down, you know?
Well, I'm not understanding you, Kathy, saying that. I'm saying you understand, saying, okay, we've got the wired ones, let's leave them
Right.
and fill in with.
Yeah,
solar
that's
and
what I'm
technology.
asking.
That's, so that was what I was.
Right,
Yeah,
Your
that
way I was understanding,
Yeah.
and Emily's opposite. Kind of solar and
But I
then,
think it's
you
worth
know,
talking
yeah.
about both.
yeah, a
ways.
hybrid kind of. a
Because we are
situation.
talking about phasing this in whatever we. do.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah,
I
that's
guess
kind of
as
like
long
the
as-
first 23. Do the wired, get them into the most critical locations, which is from a safety perspective, also covers that. But allow the technology to continue to be evolved during that, after that first phase until we're ready, and then see where are we with the solar and go from there.
do we need to commit to Black Hills for the full lighting, or can we just say this is all? Yeah.
Can we just commit Black Hills?
No, we can commit in phases. I believe that's how the agreement, the draft agreement we have is structured. It outlines the entire project cost, but it also says this is what we have to spend in phase 1 and phase 2 and 3 are gonna be whatever they're gonna be when they come around.
So how does that, did that help?
Yeah,
Check things out for you?
And I think the important part too is with staff. What they're saying, because they live, drink and sleep this stuff and they know how critical it is. Because if we go the solar part, it's gonna definitely take a lot longer. And, you know, your safety issues that you've been talking about it. If that is, you know, very important. But I do like the idea of, with the technology, you just don't know. It's going to improve. But is it the right time to jump in on it right now, or if you know, if you went the first part with electric, with the wire, you'd solve some of those problems and mind what you're saying. We take a look at a hybrid in the future.
Give us time for a field trip to France.
I'm also thinking about the appearance of them. A nice compact unit, which hardwired would be, versus this big thing up there. Battery and all that is gonna take, I don't know, maybe that's just popped in my pea brain.
Okay, Emily?
Oh, I have mixed feelings about it, but I think as long as we don't have to commit to the full, all of the phases with Black Hills, it probably makes sense to get the lighting in at the key places that we need it now. Do it wired, but not rule out adding in with solar, if that looks like the best thing to do in the future.
Sure.
So actually, we're pretty excited that you guys are putting in these 12 lights, because we're gonna get some data from that. We actually believe that it would be a really good solution in different situations, and so we're probably going to pursue a tariff anyway. Either through this or a DSM program, and we think it would be popular. It's just a matter of, we just don't have a lot of information.
Right, yeah.
So that's what I have heard from our team, is they like the idea. We're just not quite there in terms of
It
technology.
makes sense in a lot of ways, if the lighting is what it is.
Sure.
I think so. I think that, cause I'm all for getting lights out there
Yeah.
yesterday, you know, so I think that's a good solution. Let's go with the direct wired right now and see how that works, cause anything's gotta be an improvement.
It's a little bit like how Mark Twain went bankrupt, which was slowly and then suddenly. Well, once you identify the safety issue,
Yeah, oh,
you're in the sun.
well, I've been there for a long time, because, you know, driving Fremont Drive. And all of a sudden somebody wants liquor desperately, so they're jumping over all the lanes in the highway, and then they're jumping over Fremont Drive in the dark and a black. It's like, oh, I don't wanna be in the paper that way.
Okay, so now the other question, I think that I agree with what we said. That we should probably do option one, let things develop and see where we are. When it's time to consider other pathways. So you probably heard enough to represent what the committee feelings are on this.
Yeah, I think what Leo and I had planned, if there was a split decision to take it to a vision committee or a general government committee, it sounds like we have pretty clear consensus, so we'll just take it straight to city council meeting for approval.
Okay, so here's the further question.
Okay.
With that is, would we like to send a representative to represent what our views were on this? Or do we let the presentation speak for itself? I mean, it seemed pretty clear from going through the presentation and the analysis, what seems to be the logical choice. What are your feelings on sending somebody to speak to council?
We have three people here that. I mean, you know,
People on council.
yeah, either one of the two council people or you, John.
Okay.
So in other words, you non-council people trust us to represent the rest of the committee accurately.
Occasionally.
Okay,
Yes.
I do think for those not on, those on council who are not here today, I think it helps to have this fuller discussion. I don't know that means it has to be at committee level. Because we often get into detailed discussions at a council meeting. So, but I think the information is helpful, and it's really helped the way people get together. You know, when we talked about, I think it was September or so, when we first talked about it at council. This really, the additional information.
I want to congratulate this committee. We came to a conclusion. fairly quickly. So, yes, I want to
Yeah, can't-
congratulate everybody here.
So one more question, and this may be more so for the council members, but we can put this on the consent agenda or we can have it as a discussion item and Leo can go through the presentation. Is there a preference there?
I think it's.
The presentation?
Yeah, just because of the way it came out from council as a whole, that we wanted to explore the
Yep.
solar more, I think we need the full
And
explanation.
just the total cost, it's a lot of money, it's not like a bid for chemicals. Not to diminish that, but it's a lot, of- so I think it's.
Yeah.
It'll be very helpful to people coming through our lovely city. And another question, 6 months, when would a start date be, do you think? I mean, are we gonna have everything?
You'll be able to
from
with the shovel
First
ready.
Street through Mackenzie shut down for all summer?
I don't think,
I'm sorry.
I don't
right.
think Black Hills will need many lane closures for the work they have to do.
Okay, yeah,
Most of theirs will be shoulder closures off the side of the road.
Okay.
I'd have to reconfirm with Eric, the local manager, but I believe he was saying it could start relatively quickly once we had a contract. There were a few pieces and parts that maybe had like a 8-12 week lead time for certain items, but a lot of the groundwork can get started before then.
We aren't talking Rhodes Avenue at all, and
No. I don't,
We don't want.
that's a different committee for another day, I think.
No Texas here. No Texas. Okay.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank
Thank
very
you,
much.
appreciate you.
Thank you,
And
Leo.
let me know what, if you got a preference on what meeting to bring that back.
You can put it on the next one if you want. It's up to you.
February, yeah, okay.
It's about one
Sooner the
friend of
better.
ours.
The old lady's gonna take a quick break, so just start it out.
Okay. So now we're moving on to our discussion with the retired power systems engineer. Did I get that right? Is that what it is? Is that a fair description?
Close enough, yeah.
Close enough. Well, Tom, you'd introduce yourself a little bit. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your background to get us started here?
Most of the folks here probably don't know the background. They basically, my role was to be the planning engineer. So that's determining capacity for growth for Black Hills. Been in Canyon City for 28 years, so and I supported all of Black Hills, including all the way down to La Junta. So I'm intimately familiar with the infrastructure of all of the southern Colorado areas of Black Hills, but especially in town here. So I know where the substations are. I know where the city limits are, and there's a lot of customers inside and outside the city limits, and that's a challenge for whatever your aspirations are. How you're going to serve everybody.
So I had an opportunity to sit down with Tom and talk over some of these electrical issues and some of the interesting things I think that Tom told us is really, there's 4 substations that serve King City. I have that correct. 3 of them are outside the city. 1 of them's inside the city. So in any talk of municipalization, those are the I guess it'd be fair to say sticking points. And because it gets really complicated if you try to either build new or acquire a substation that's outside the city. And of course, it's the bolder questions that haven't been answered by the courts yet. How do you handle customers currently served from power sources within the city versus customers? So you've got lines running both ways. We have lines in the county that run into the city, lines in the city that run out to county customers. And so those are all, questions that haven't been answered legally yet. And is part of the consideration. One of the things that we've said that the city is interested in doing is a poles and wire survey and inventory and understanding exactly what the system is that we have that serves us. And one of the interesting things I think that Tom said is that you were in charge with essentially, you were charged with doing that same function for Black Hills, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I was consulted on that for, we were talking to Pueblo.
Well, yes, to identify polls and lifetimes and current status and things like that.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, you said
Talking about the inventory.
inventory, yes,
Yeah.
inventory.
Black Hills did a system-wide inventory to update their GIS, so they have all that data. It took 5 years of sending out personnel, contractors to look at poles, estimate the age, height, and class of poles, the wire size throughout, not on the secondary side, but just on the primary side. So once we get to the transformer, what the line to the house is probably not mapped. But Black Hills has a very detailed GIS inventory of all facilities, including transmission lines and substations and all their locations. And their real-time updates is what they do. Black Hills has engaged in data share agreements with entities that were interested in having certain data. But of course, what you might get from that is gonna be up to, what you're gonna be able to agree with as far as how much information that Black Hills is gonna allow. And if you want that to be part of a subcontractor who's gonna do a lot of analysis for you, we want to include them in the parties so that it gets held in confidence. Utilities are especially sensitive to all their facilities being known by anyone who might have motives to disrupt the grid. So they're not going to be just handing you the files. It's got to be, under very careful guidelines.
And it'd be fair to say projected use of the data. I mean, that's the big deal, big deal from the electric company's perspective. How are you gonna use the data? If you're gonna use it to try and displace them, the companies generally aren't too amenable to handing somebody the information to put them out of business. That's what we're talking about. So to me, that was interesting that it took 5 years for the complete system wide on the primary side. That's not even all the what goes to houses. And so if you've got a neighborhood of houses and you've got power coming in, the primary side is determined by voltage, would that be right?
Yes, all the way to the transformer.
Mhm.
And so if you have a subdivision like Wolf Park or Dawson Ranch, all the power to all the transformers would be in that data. The underground primary, 13,000 volts. In the alleyways, in the backyards, downtown, all that would be known in that data.
But where, once you hit the transformer and you step it down to household voltage levels, then that's not.
Probably not. There might be some, but it's the overhead would be more likely to be in there than the underground.
So it was interesting to me that it took Black Hills 5 years to do that. Because to me, that has a big bearing on if Canyon City were to do, which we have budgeted, the poles and wires study. The number one, it's not gonna be over 5 years. And what the implications of that is that you get less information than you would like from a poles and wire study. If you have the complete knowledge, as Tom has been talking about, That's one thing, but with you know, number one, we don't have 5 years worth of budget to do. a whole
But we're not
Let's-
doing that.
Yeah, let's,
The entire,
let's narrow it into our city.
So
Yeah.
it'd be a lesser.
that included West Cliff, Cripple Creek, Buffalo.
See, it goes all the way
Oh,
up.
okay,
All the way
all right,
to the east.
yeah, well, that makes a difference.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
That makes a difference.
I think the only non-part we'd look at would be Lincoln Park, let's.
But the other part of that kind of jumps out to me anyway, is the fact that it does mean that if when you do a poles and wires survey, that it has a limited shelf life unless
Oh, yeah.
it's constantly updated. And that's something that,
If you're able to get a data share agreement with Black Hills, it's updated in real time.
What are the odds of that, John?
It's above his pay.
you can always ask. Yeah,
Black Hills used former linemen, who basically, that's what they did. That was a service that contractor did. They had, utility kind of services for installing facilities, but they also had a group that did those kind of inventories. And if you're gonna do your own inventory, you wanna avoid by the hour, because it'll take a lot longer to do it on an hourly rate than a lump sum,
Yeah.
right,
just so you know.
sure.
That's why we wanted the subcontractors to put in our laterals, because they were paid by the foot. Not by the hour.
And you brought a map with you, I think that you've got, I don't
Yeah,
know.
this is a map of Canyon City. It shows the. city
We might wanna
in gray.
Stand up and gather around if you want.
And the four circles, the dot in the center are the four substations. And as you can see, 3 of them are outside city limits.
Yeah.
One of them is inside.
Yeah.
The one that's inside is just right down the road.
Yeah.
But the one that's inside, it's in a substation that is, has 115,000 volt facilities inside of it. So it's a shared. Black Hills uses it to connect to other transmission substations. That's what they call the transmission level. It's 115,000.
Is that, okay, and that's the dot right there on the bend.
Right.
Yeah, okay, and then that's the new one up on 8 Mile there.
No, this is 15th and.
Oh, I know it by Florida,
Yeah,
Florida.
this one is there right by the East Canyon complex for the
Yeah,
DLC.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so the new substation up 8 Mile is not on there,
Oh,
because the map is
It's off
not,
the map.
yeah. Yeah, okay, all right.
But
And the other one's by the road.
the one that's up on 8 Mile that you're talking
Uh-huh.
about is that's north of 8 Mile.
Mhm.
That's a joint effort between Black Hills and Western Area Power Authority.
Oh, it's a walk.
Is that
Along
on?
with some.
Oh, it is. The one you're.
Yeah.
So there's.
There's another one-
Partway up.
There's
and then
another
there's-
one that's on County Road 69. That's a
Right.
transmission only sub, called the Hawkback sub.
Yeah, that's.
But it interconnects with transmission lines to the 8 Mile sub and
Yeah.
to Cripple Creek.
Yeah, because that 8 Mile.
So 8
And
miles.
it just has a new line that's been built from Pueblo West that connects into it as well.
Yeah,
In fact, there's a new line being built right now.
Right.
To connect that line into town. You see
Going
new
across
poles.
that one.
If you go up on York, you'll see new poles.
Hmm.
If you go across, if you go on High Street, you'll see some big tall poles. Weren't there before. Or they were shorter anyway, but now double circuits. But this one is, if you try to drive to that substation, you'll get a visit from the security folks at the prison.
yeah.
Asking, what are you doing here? Even though it's not on their property, they seem to think that you don't need to be there.
Yeah.
We're test driving a new car and just gonna turn around there. Yeah, we got the business.
But as you can see, there's a lot of customers outside city limits.
Yeah.
I don't know if this map's up to date, it probably is.
There's probably been a thing or two added.
But
in terms of
this-
city limits.
This doesn't show the Royal Gorge either.
Right.
That power is sourced from that 8 Mile substation. And so that 8 Mile substation has a transformer that feeds that gravel pit,
Oh, yeah.
Parkdale, plus everything on top of the hill, plus the Royal Gorge. The Royal Gorge fire, several years ago caused Black Hills to pretty much go in and replace and update all the electrical, so that's all pretty much new in the Royal Gorge campus on both sides, so. That substation on 8 Mile also feeds Copper Gulch, so there's a lot of residential customers off of that one. Not sure how you would figure out what you want to do there unless you want to buy a piece of a WAPA substation to
Yeah.
to serve all that. Or how you would, figure out how to go into city limits with a substation that's outside city limits. Annexation is a possibility, but there's still the upfront cost of purchasing all that with an unwilling seller.
Yeah.
And as I told the folks earlier, if your consultant is gonna lowball everything, Black Hills is gonna highball everything, and if you go to arbitration, they're gonna be in the middle, which is still gonna be a lot higher than what you wanna take.
When we met earlier this month, you mentioned some parts of the system that are a little bit older, need updating, some 4 kV stuff, and you
Yeah.
talked a little bit more about that and where that's at.
If you, well, the easiest one is to go to the library, Canyon City Library, and go into the alley behind it and look up. It's scary. It's been, planned to upgrade that 2 years from now for the last 15 years. You wouldn't want to do that on your own. That's enormously expensive.
Yeah.
Depends on how they want to reserve it from overhead and underground facilities. Putting underground in an alley is really expensive because you got all that concrete and asphalt back there. Plus on those platform structures, one pole is owned by Black Hills, one pole is owned by the phone company. And we gotta, whoever's gonna do the work, gotta figure out, okay, we gotta negotiate with the phone company as to how we're gonna do this. Is it gonna remain platform, or is it gonna put in just a single pole that has all the facilities on it? Pueblo replaced some 8 structures like that in their alleys, and they went with a single pole structure. Which minimized the facilities in the alley, and it was a lot less expensive to do it. But my understanding from talking to one of the Black Hills folks recently is that they're planning to replace all that 4 kV in those alleys, starting in 2 years. Of course,
15 years ago.
yeah, 15 years ago, but this was the last report I got, and it's old. And what they do is we put in new poles, new wire, and they upgrade the voltage to 13,000 volts instead of the old 4 kV. When we had or when Black Hills had the power plant down here, there was a substation that came out of that same transmission sub, went over to another transformer that fed 25,000 volt customers, 3 circuits, and I think 4 circuits that were 4 kV. And that was all wrecked out and converted, so there's step up transformers to go up the highway toward 8 Mile. There's the stuff going south was converted to 13,000 volts up to a certain point, and then that's the stuff way to the south is now fed from a different direction at 25 kV. And in the 4 kV there, you'll see platform stations, like 3 or 4 of them. One of them in I think Veterans Park that steps it down from 13 kV to 4 kV. So some of those alleys are still served at 4 kV, but just through a platform transformer station. There's a couple of them on the hogbacks. You can see those dropping it down. But there's also, there's not just three-phase in the alleys, there's a lot of residential customers that are served at 4 kV. Of course, at single phase, it's like 2.4 kV. But you got these old, really black, dark brown looking transformers that look different than the more modern ones. Those would all be replaced with new 13 kV facilities when they upgrade that.
So the older equipment that you mentioned in the area of the library, is that serving all of downtown Main Street, or what is that all?
It serves from Main Street north. The line between Highway 50 and Main Street from First Street to Safeway is a 13,000 volt line. It is probably the most reliable line in all of the Black Hills service territory. It's insulated conductor on a davit arm, and it was put in the 1980s, 83 or 84. And it never goes out due to, you know, any kind of incidental contact. It's very reliable.
And that
That's-
serves
that was
that south side of Main between the highway.
Yeah, so there's a lot of commercial businesses in that stretch. The older stuff is gonna be further north. And it's just, it's a small piece compared to the whole, most of it's 13 kV. Throughout all of the town.
Pretty interesting.
Mhm.
The, Steve, I thought you'd have 100 questions.
Actually, I do have one question. It goes back to the streetlight discussion. You've made your decision. I've got a question though for the engineering community here. If you wire the whole length and put in 23 lights or whatever it was, I forget. Versus if you wire half of it and put in the same number of lights, does the cost go down, and or can you put in more lights if you run the wire half as far? I don't know which makes, it didn't come up during discussion, and I'm kind of curious if there's a value proposition there for.
You generally don't try to run from Mackenzie to 15th Street with one low voltage wire. You find the source, the transformer in close proximity, and you run it to that light. If you're hardwired.
So you would run the full length with fewer lights rather than running it half
But
the length.
it's
with-
not a
I
full.
think it's a safety issue more than the dollar.
It sounds like they're basically taking spurs off of existing infrastructure.
Yeah.
You would find the closest proximity source
Yeah,
that had adequate capacity
okay.
and serve that light.
So you're not running a long line, you're tapping.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things we did do in preparation for this is the stuff that Kurt mainly authored, was provided to Tom, so he had a chance to take a look at that. I thought that's, I don't know what your opinion is, but that's probably pretty high level stuff. You know?
Tom's afraid to comment on that.
Tom's smarter than the.
Okay, any other questions or discussion you'd like to have with Tom?
Well, I think just the only thing I think of at the moment is to kind of revisiting some of our history and city council. The decisions, as I recall, to do the poles and wire study was to just have our own information to the extent that we could do that, rather than relying on the ability or lack of ability to do some kind of a data share agreement with Black Hills. That we just felt like it would be helpful for our, as we work through this whole process of trying to figure out the ultimate goal, which of course is to reduce costs to ratepayers within the city, including the city, businesses, residents. So I just think it's worth pointing out again that the reason we decided to fund that is because we will own the information, be in control of that. So that's what we're hoping.
Any other comments? Well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, I
I
just
really
want to say,
appreciate that. We may have other questions we'd like to ask you at the time.
And you're always welcome to attend.
You bet.
Yeah, this is an open meeting.
And if you're interested in the chair on the committee, that could be arranged too.
Yeah. I think
Chair or seat?
that-
I don't know if you were giving.
No, see. That's what I mean.
A slip.
These are chairs.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And with that, I guess Gail, you're up next. Emily, do you wanna get us
Oh,
started?
well, our great relationship with Gail Connors, she can say her title better than I can, but media relations, community engagement with the PUC. Kathy and I first met Gail, a little over a year ago at a public meeting in Pueblo. And had a great conversation and have had some connection with her since then. And Gail had reached out to me recently saying, you know, one of the things the PUC is trying to do is more connection with communities. And, you know, maybe there'd be a way to do a public meeting of some kind, whether that would be the Public Utilities Commissioners or PUC staff or both, or what the topics would be. Is kind of to be determined. And so it sounded like a good idea for Gail to come and talk with the Energy Advisory Committee for the city. And talk about what those possibilities might be.
Yeah, I'm open. But I have to tell you, speaking about the line downtown behind the library, I was just down there the other night walking my dog before I went to dinner, so I know exactly where you're talking about.
Take pictures?
No, I have a little, it's like a PUC 101, very basic, to share with you folks. A lot of people really do not know what, the PUC does, which I found out. And, in fact, when I started with them, I was surprised because they were asking me about towing. So, what does the PUC have to do with towing? Because I'd formerly worked for Springs Utility, so I was used to the PUC from a very utility perspective. But they actually have 6 industries that they regulate. Energy by far is probably the largest one. And we do not regulate the co-ops, we do not regulate the municipalities. We do regulate Excel, Black Hills, Atmos, Colorado Natural Gas. Those would be the biggies. And in fact, I was just looking to see what was coming up in regards to the proceedings. And I think what would be good for me, possibly, would be to just be here regularly, just to, or let you guys know when things are coming up that might be of particular interest to Canyon City. It may not be everything, but what we got to talking about, and I'm not sure if Kathy, you were on a workshop we had on equity recently, but someone from Canyon City was. Emily is now on the Equity Advisory Group Committee for the PUC for that particular proceeding. And we got to talking and somebody, I thought to say it was you, Kathy, but why not have a sponsored meeting in Canyon City with PUC at some point? And I like that because what would be nice is not necessarily to have like a public comment hearing where they just sit there and they listen to public comments, but to have something that's more engaging. So we were kicking around the idea of maybe having a presentation either to council or the energy group or to the public. Where maybe the first 20 minutes or so, we just kind of give an overall presentation, but then the second half would be something that Canyon City would want to focus on and really target it toward Canyon City. And how we can accommodate that. So it would not be something where the commissioners would be making a decision on something, but it could be very well our administrator, we have an administration director. It could be some of our subject matter experts that work with fixed utilities. I can't tell you how much time I've spent on towing, believe it or not. Transportation issues, so we oversee taxis and TNCs, you know, that the lifts, the trying to think the other big one, Uber, thank you. That's a lot, man. We also have regulation over at-grade crossings with rail. We also have regulation over gas pipeline safety. And there's been some movement there with that recently and with the federal PHMSA administration. And their safety requirements. So there's things going on. I just would want to make it something that was topical to Canyon City, because I do know our director and I do know the commissioners are interested in getting out.
I was really surprised when we first met you and how easy it was because there was hardly anybody there from Pueblo. That was what was absolutely amazing to me. Having been to a few PUC meetings in Pueblo when I worked there to where the room was overflowing.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't imagine why that would ever have happened, but it's interesting to see that how little interest it sometimes creates and yet what an impact your commission has over daily lives and their pocketbooks.
Yeah, almost
And
every
so
part.
if we were to set this up right, I think we could get a pretty good turnout here. I think it would be different than the one that we attended. So I think it would be a great opportunity if we can.
And it
come
could
up
be
with
something very topical for you folks that might have a bigger statewide implication, but it really would depend on what would be the most interest of Canyon City.
I don't know. First thing comes to my mind is what impact does the PUC or will it have on, like, say, gas ranges and replacements and things like that? You know, because we are a fairly low income region. And all of that talk about changing that out.
Electrification.
Yeah, and I think it's, I don't know, it just gripes my bottom a little bit about how that could potentially take over and stuff.
Yeah. There is, hang on a second, let me just, I pulled this up in particular because the cases that are coming up. So Atmos recently filed, as did Black Hills, their clean heat plan. For Atmos. I don't see a procedural schedule
Yeah,
for it
And I
yet.
would imagine it
Or
would really affect them as well as it would Black Hills and XL that also serve gas. And it's pretty interesting. So that's just one small thing, but
No, but you're bringing up a good point. So DSM, let's see, DSM strategic issues. Here we go. They put in an application, this is Atmos,
sure.
May 5th. It looks like a deadline is set for February 22nd. So, but they reached a settlement in November. So depending on what really is, not only can I follow up in terms of what the proceedings are that would be of interest, we're trying to get better at communications. I'm overhauling the communications and outreach plan. I much prefer to do this than doing it online. And even though our office is in Denver, I am actually rarely there. I live in Pueblo West, so I want to get out more to the different communities that can sometimes be, I don't want to say forgotten, but
Go ahead and say forgotten.
Yeah.
I don't want to say forgotten. I just think that there are statewide rules and regulations that affects everyone. And a lot of people don't always know that the PUC is there to help serve them.
Well, Gail, living in the southern part of Colorado, do you see some of those PUC issues have a greater impact in our poorer more rural area than up in the metropolitan areas?
I would say issues like towing, transportation is definitely more focused on the higher population
Yeah.
areas. Not that it doesn't exist in the rest
Right.
of the state, but I definitely see issues, even though we're really not involved with water. We only oversee a couple small private water companies. Definitely the energy issues
Yeah.
is a big,
Absolutely.
it's like the 500-pound gorilla in the room, you know?
Yeah. Well, all the brouhaha up in Denver, what, this time last year with Excel raising
Mm-hmm.
the rates because of the cold and everything. I mean, it was cold here too. And we barely
Exactly.
saw a blip, you know, as far as interest in helping this part of the state.
Well, I'm glad you reminded me that because we just started, the PUC doesn't really have programs per se because we're regulators.
You can encourage though.
But they just started one that I can send you guys the information on. It's called the Utility Bill Help Program. And basically, it's to get to those communities where, you know, first you have to apply for LEAP. But then a lot of people get turned down.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is reach out to those people that get turned down for LEAP and then really connecting them to their service providers for PIPP money that the service providers have, such as Black Hills and Atmos and Public Service Company. And there is on our website, and I will send you guys the link directly to this utility, and we just started it. It is a pilot program for this heating year. We want to see how it goes. But we're trying to get these people hooked up after they're denied by LEAP to these other utility programs that are there to help.
I think that's a really good example of the kind of information that would be helpful in a broader community discussion. You know, I even occasionally connect with, you know, like one or some of the either nonprofits or government entities that serve the poor. And, you know, I would imagine even for them that the information's a little fragmented about how to serve, where to point people for help.
Mhm.
So
We just did a huge direct mail piece to, and I think you folks were included in it too, about the program. But it was throughout every service territory in Colorado. So, we really are trying to address it, and you're right, it was. It was public outrage. Last year.
and I know that some of the, and I can't quote numbers and specifics right at this moment, but just from sitting in and listening to some of either the public comment hearings online or other kinds of things. I know that there are some programs, here's my vague idea, and anyone can correct me, but I think there's